This slide caught my eye because it's a recent reference in a trade publication that talks about how even with everything that's going on in the cybersecurity environment, the biggest threat that we have is really us. You know, we can put all the technology that we want to out there to protect our systems and our PCs, but all it takes is one person clicking on an attachment or a bad link in an email, and the crooks know this, and so they're continuously preying on that fact to get into our systems. So what we're going to try and show you today is some ways that you can be more aware and protect yourselves from falling victim to these scams. You know, all of us are subject to these threats. In the previous presentation that I did, I talked about, at that time, people were thinking, I've got a Macintosh computer. Those aren't affected by these threats. But really, every device that you use connected to the internet is threatened. Your mobile devices, Macintosh, you know, Windows computers used to be considered most vulnerable, but that was really because there were so many of them out there. They were the target. Now all devices are targets, and you hear a lot about Internet of Things. Those things are real targets, so you need to be aware and protect those. I'm not going to steal Paul's thunder. He's going to talk more about that, but you know, again, the fraudsters are coming up with new schemes, new ways to try and trick you into clicking on links and attachments. Same old, same old. We have to be aware that you are real targets for these kinds of threats. These hacksters go after small businesses because they recognize that many of us don't have the resources to protect ourselves. And they know that, and they go after it. So, you know, it's this whole program today is just to try and increase your awareness of these threats and give you some, like Kathy said, some useful tips on how you can protect yourselves. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Paul, let him give you some real-life examples and things to look for. This will be in addition to the handouts, which I encourage you to take with you. Those are also on the web page, and you'll be able to print them and distribute them as you need to.
Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Chief Technology Officer at the bank. I've been here just about 3 years. Darcy's going to be retiring and is going to really miss his services. Just looking around when I was sitting this morning, it was interesting because I was looking at the brochures over there. There was one for the Arctic. And I'm like, okay, gosh, why do we have to go to the Arctic when it's so cold out here? Because it's been like, brr, you go out this morning. But the technology piece, just going to go over a high level of technology. I'm not going to get in detail. If you guys want more questions, want more details on some of these vectors, a way people can exploit your systems, I'll be around after for some more questions. But really just going to go over the digital attack, in-person, a phone attack, and pretexting. Those are some of the more common. Let's see.
Let me tell you about technology.
Thank you. A little feedback.
Your training.
So start with the digital attacks. One of the main ways to get into your organization is through the browser. When you're out browsing the internet, going to different sites, if you go onto some bad sites, what's going to happen is they're going to install, when you click on a link or you click on something in that link, they're going to install either malware, virus, keystroker, or some ransomware. The keystroker, if you don't know, is they'll actually log what you're typing when you on your keyboard. They'll capture that and they'll use that data to get into your systems. We'll get into ransomware a little bit later. We'll get to more of the details how that can be exploited and how people can use your systems against you. Phishing attacks is sending you an email. That's sending you an email, and in that email you're going to see different links, different information in there, and they're going to want you to click on information. And usually it's broad. It's a broad group. It's nothing that's targeted just to you. It's just a random email sent out to users. The next one is spear phishing. So on spear phishing, this is targeted at you. This is targeted at something. They got some information off your website, somewhere where you have your email address. We usually see like these a lot when you have your name out there, publications. Kathy gets a lot of them. This is here, the CEO fraud. Since Kathy's out in the organizations, she's targeted, and she'll get a lot of these. She'll send them to us and say, is this legitimate? So that's one of the things that you got to be aware of, how they get your information. It's these public sites or your information that's out there in the public. What's that? Facebook, yeah, we'll get into there is a handout that you have on your table. It's about email. It gets into all the different systems and a way that you can help with identifying emails and what's in them, what to look for.
If I could just mention too, not only is Kathy a target for these attacks, but we've actually had a couple of recent events where people within the bank have gotten emails purporting to be from Kathy saying, I need you to wire out a bunch of money for me, and I need you to do it right away, and I need you to confirm your availability. I mean, that's classic phishing, spear phishing tactic, and obviously they weren't for. And there was, you may have read in the Valley News September-ish about a local municipality that was actually victimized by this, and they lost somewhere around $200,000 to such a scale where they knew enough about the organization. They sent a spear phish, and the person that received it fell for it. They didn't follow proper procedures and verify that it was a legitimate request, and they went ahead and wire transferred money, and once that money was gone, they couldn't get it back. And so it's real, and it's happening to us and locally.
Thanks, Darcy. This slide here, just going to point out ways to look at malicious links. You usually see these like in an email, okay? So you're going to get an email, and if it was someone from like Ledger, you'll see something here where it's www.ledgerbank.com. The key part is you want to look at is this ledgerbank.com, right? That's our domain, what they call your domain, what you're known as out there in the cyber world. You'll see subdirectories where you'll see, again, the primary part of the domain, ledgerbank.com, right? And then you'll see the subdirectories off of that. The other way that you can also see it is a subdomain where you're going to see secure mail dash, and then again you got ledgerbank.com, right? With links you want to look out for is this piece right here, this ledgerbank.com, when it's broken, okay? When they're starting to insert something like ledger.bank.com, right? Because we're not ledger.bank, or you might see a ledger-bank.com, okay? Really, this primary piece shouldn't be broken. If you see something like, maybe it's a Yahoo or something, if you see ya.yahoo.com, that's not their domain. So be careful in those pieces there. And again, if you're not expecting links in an email, don't click on them. If you get something random sent to you, don't click on links, don't click on attachments in those emails. If you're not expecting it, be cautious. So when you see the different information that you'd want to see in this email, some of the stuff that stands out, it's like right here. When we talked about those links, the names, so this one's, if you know Facebook, it's facebook.com, right? If you look at the link here, it's Facebook Mail Inc.-inc.net, right? So we want to be careful because that's not really Facebook. That's someone else sending this out. That's where you got to look at those links. Like if it said, an example, so you said something like here, if it was ledgered, right? If it said ledgerbank-inc.net, well, that's not us. So be careful of those type of links when you look into them. Another thing is like this one right here, where it says see photo, really is a link. And it's not going to be their link to Facebook. It's going to be off to another site where you're really not going to see a photo. You're most likely going to get some ransomware. So sorry I'm not getting the PowerPoint in there, or the emails, you could see the links. Another way that people can get in is, most of these people, when they start targeting you, they're going to do like in person. And we have tendencies to believe what people are telling us, right? So if someone with authority comes in, starts talking to you, maybe might be the police, but they maybe see, again, some organization, maybe an IT person. IT person maybe works in an area that works for a contractor for one of the things we worry about. If someone can saying who they might be working for a vendor, but they're really not. So those are the people that are trying to get into your business as someone else. Tailgating, that's again, if you have security parameters for like us at the bank, we have codes that you have to get into our buildings. A lot of times people want to tailgate behind you to get into that building, so you'll hold the door open and not challenge who they are. So that's kind of the tailgating. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is infected USBs. So if you guys go to seminars where they give out freebies, you know, like where you give them a table and you put a freebie. So if I stuck freebies over there with the USB on them, you take them home, stick them in your computer, you could get malware infected on your system there. So you want to be careful of that. Again, it's that curiosity. One of the other things that hackers do is maybe drop sticks out on the sidewalk somewhere, and you pick them up, saying, oh, what's this? Think it's something you could use, and in there's malware.
Or they'll label it and it'll say payroll or something, so it really tries to pique your curiosity. You pick it up and you're really tempted to look at it. Don't.
Yeah. And this next, yes, go ahead.
I think I read recently, maybe from this, that now they're saying don't use other people's charging cables from your phone because
Yeah, it's different. You'll see that in the handout. That handout's travel, that's a big piece now. Is that you think it's simple because that USB, how you charge, because you can get information to the USB cable as well. So there's a lot of stuff in that handout for travel that talks about that. Next one is voice phishing, or call phishing. It's basically the call, someone calling you, asking you for information. They're going to want you to call them back. That's the other piece that comes with that. So kind of one of the side things, callbacks. Could be a toll call, you know, as well as the malware that comes with it. And they're going to want to ask you for PPI, you know, it's non-public information they're going to be going for. Social security number, credit cards, just a couple of them. Smishing, text messaging. So that's kind of one of the things that we're seeing more and more on. Just heard about one yesterday that we received where looked like it came from Ledger. And it says click here to either say stop these messages or to say that yeah, this is legit. It was, and I believe it was a account, and it was a charge on it. Did you see that, Kathy?
I did.
Yeah. So and again, it's kind of fishy, right? Did you expect this? Well, no, that you don't expect it unless you have something set up in the parameters. But again, you're going to want to look at those, what they're saying in there. There's going to be, could be typos, misspellings, bad links. Okay, just be careful. That's another thing that's, again, we'll probably see more. Darcy Slide, the first one, a lot of this stuff's been around for a while. They're just trying to recycle it.
And it's, if you stress the urgency piece, this text said that there'd been a fraudulent transaction in your account. You need to click here to stop it from happening.
Yeah.
And of course, people panic. And so it's the urgency factor that the crooks try to embed in all of their fraud actions, because you don't stop and think. And fortunately, one of our clients sent it to us, and so we're trying to get the message out that this is happening.
Yeah, and a lot of this information is, very last bullet, your stuff might be out there already, your email account. There's sites where the people farm the stuff and they sell it. So if there's different ways to see if your information is out there. So if you want more on that, I'll be around, so feel free to ask. Oh yeah, pretexting. You know, someone is presenting them as someone else that they're really not. I'm a hacker coming in and I'm saying I'm working for another vendor. And that's kind of that pretexting, setting it up, or even sending you something. I'm going to be here at your site at a certain day, and then coming in and saying I'm that person. I'm really not that person, but that's the whole idea of building that ahead of time. I'm going to say, hey, I know Kathy Underwood. I was at a leading women's event with her today. So I'm trying to drop something that people know that's out there. So on passwords, when you go into someone's sites, it's like, or different sites that you have out there for your banking, for your credit cards, your investment accounts, you don't want to, or those are like more your financials, but then you have your Facebook, your email account, Yahoo's, whatever it might be. You really shouldn't be using the same password for all these different sites, because if I get one, there's a good chance I can get into all your accounts. So you really should use different types of passwords, usernames for different accounts. If you have trouble with like doing passwords, keeping them, writing them down, there are sites out there, sites or software you can put on your PC that can help you track and maintain those passwords. So yeah, the other thing is like, if someone reaches out to you, or if you get something and they're asking for information, go back to that, reach back out to them. Don't take face value of them asking your information. If they reach out and say, well, can I call you back? If it was, say, someone at Ledger, if you really didn't recognize it and you didn't expect it, maybe you want to call back to Ledger and say, hey, just got a call from Paul at Ledger. You could get into them or see if that really existed. And again, the last piece is just look for information just doesn't sound right. It's that gut feeling, right? If you don't seem like they're telling you something right, it's probably not. This is the ransomware. So ransomware is one of the things that's increasing in technology. I guess that one of the biggest things, if you ever get hit with ransomware, they tell you not to unplug your PC. You don't want to shut it down because if there's anything information on there, you're probably going to lose it, or you're not going to be able to get it back. Or if you have some cyber insurance or something, what they're going to want to do is use that forensics, and you might lose those forensics to get the information that was on there. So you really just want to, if you have a PC that still has an Ethernet cable in the back of it, one of the things that looks like a phone, you just want to take that out. Or if you have, it's wireless, say like my Surface here, probably just want to disable the wireless connection on there. And then again, the key piece, go ahead.
When they hack your computer, does it also hack separate backup drive? Not the near network, but...
Yeah, I think what can happen is you can get malware that stays dormant, and at a certain time it might trigger or something that on that backup. So again, if you backed up things that usually like execute, there's they call executables or some type of system that's going to install or launch it. So if you had something, say an email, right, and you never clicked on that email, never entered that email, it could still be in your backup system if you want to restore it. So it could be in there. It's not guaranteed, but backups do help. This archive it. With your backups, you really need to have like a strategy with it. You just don't have one backup. Maybe you take a backup for every year. At least if you had something that happened throughout the year, so if you did one, and we have a pretty in-depth backup. Every day we're backing up our data. And then we back it up into the week. Then we have one for end of the month. And then we have one for end of the year. So it's staggered. So if we did have something happen to our systems today, well, we could go to tomorrow. And then we could go, if that still was all infected, we could go to the week, and then to the month, and to the year. So you start going backwards. And then it's kind of complicated when you get into not being able to have your IT staff or an internal IT staff. But we can talk more about ways to mitigate that and ways to back it up or archive it to different systems. So if you want to talk more about it afterwards, you can. Yeah, that's kind of that next slide. Thank you. Backups. Next section.
All right, good morning, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about liabilities from a business perspective. So obviously, you as business owners are responsible for your computers and your internet access. Typically, those are through contracts with your vendors, so that's where those are maintained. The biggest thing with business owners is the regulations that go around them compared to consumers. So consumers usually have more leeway, especially with fraudulent activity and being able to dispute that. With businesses and Reg E, they have 24 hours. So you get an unauthorized ACH that comes through and you don't notice it right away. Well, you're on that 24-hour time frame. So once that 24 hours is up, there's a good possibility that you're not able to dispute that charge. So you're taking that loss. And we'll go into that more in depth as we go down into like cash management products and how you can prevent that. So the biggest thing, though, is obviously you're going to be held responsible for the most part when it comes to your softwares and your computers. And then in the case that, like what Paul was talking about with cyber attacks, if that does happen, it typically will fall back onto state laws as to how you need to report that information, how you need to contact your clients and let them know that there's been sensitive data breached. So let me just move into... All right, so with the security options and preventing account takeover, right now the biggest thing moving into the new year is the operating systems. So Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported come January. I know in talking to some business clients, that is a big thing to do because it's moving on to Windows 10. A lot of people don't like that change, but the biggest thing is if you can be ahead of the game before January and get that taken care of, that's going to prevent a lot of issues going into the future. A lot of softwares, securities, those will no longer be supported on Windows 7. So depending on other applications that you have out there, going into the new year, if you're running into issues and it's not working the way it did before, this is most likely going to be the problem, and they're going to tell you, well, you're on Windows 7, it's not supported, we can't really assist in that matter. So at that point, you're going to have to upgrade your systems, which may not be the easiest thing to do, or may not, time management wise, not be in the picture. So with that though, with upgrading your browsers, would be to keep up to date on your patches. So if there's fixes that occur, so right now, like on your mobile devices, typically everybody has their updates to auto update. So we don't really notice that we're going in and patching for our apps. Our mobile devices are doing it automatically. In this case, with your PCs, you need to be monitoring those. You need to be implementing those patches. So as long as you're keeping up with that for your browsers, you should be safe and just keeping current. Outside of that is anti-malware. So most, I'm sure you're familiar with anti-spyware, firewall, malware. Those you can purchase, you can get those softwares to download, and that's that additional security monitoring on your PC to prevent things from happening and coming through. Outside of that is, in this case, we're specifically talking about online banking with your businesses. So ideally, it's great to have a PC that's just specific for your business practices or your banking practices and not really commingling the business and personal. So if you can have a separate PC to do your banking on and keeping that, that secure access just segregated, that's great. I know it's not probably feasible for a lot of people and a lot of businesses, depending. But just as a best practice, if you can keep those segregated. Never using the public computer. So when you go to hotels, like in this case, you have the business suites, and you can go and you can use their computers if you need to check your email in the case that you don't have your laptop or something with you. Those aren't necessarily secure, so just be cautious of what you're signing into on those computers, and which kind of falls into also with the wireless networks that Paul touched base on. So you don't ever really know if it's a secure wireless network or not. You can always reach out, depending on the facility that you're at. They can guide you as to use this Wi-Fi, this is the password, so that that's the secure one, instead of just going out searching one and whatever's available connecting to it. And then VPN, so virtual private networks. So some businesses, depending, have that availability, and it's just an additional secure connection before you're really getting into that business information and that sensitive data. So if you're able to implement the VPN access, it's great. All your users, would have to initially sign in through that before gaining the additional access. And then using the firewall. So some PCs already have firewalls built in, or most do, but you do have the option to kind of go above that for in this case it says router preferred, for that additional firewall. And then continuing, so Paul had mentioned keeping your passwords and IDs separate, not keeping that information consistent throughout, because obviously once they get one access, if it's the same information, it's a frenzy at that point, and they can just keep continuing to gather more. So if you can keep login names, passwords, even if it's like a phrase that you use and you can switch it up a little bit just to kind of keep it different, but not make it more difficult on yourself and trying to remember that information. And then with passwords, so I feel like previously the norm was usually 8 characters, 8 to 15 for a password. That's becoming so much of the norm that they're getting used to that and how many characters to count for. So in this case, we're recommending 15 characters or more. It's a lot, but it's a combination. You can create the combination, whether it's special characters, case sensitive. A lot of portals out there have restrictions on which special characters you can use. They're not all a requirement. It may be a combination of 2 out of the 3, or in some cases they're all required. You need to have the special character, a lowercase, uppercase, a number. But again, it's usually dependent on the portal and what the system's requirements are. Now, when we talk about biometrics, that's a big one in today's world, especially with the mobile devices. So biometrics with like the fingerprint, most of us access our phone with a fingerprint, or now the face recognition. So airports are doing the retina. So for more convenient, quicker travel, they'll just scan your eye and off you go, you're going right through. And that's how they're able to validate you. So it doesn't eliminate the passwords by any means, it's really just an additional layer to identify the individual. But we are seeing that more often too.
And one thing on the passwords, when you go out to websites, a lot of times they'll have your password, you have to choose your special characters or information. And then you get security questions, right? They're ask you, okay, what was your mascot at your high school, right? So one of the things that they're going to do is they're going to finding of you, is that you might know that hacker, right? So some tips they give you is like instead of saying national mascot, like to say your school name, or you can take, there's different ways you can go about answering those. You might not want to answer what they're asking for. You could just take, for example, the first noun in the sentence, right? For every security question you ask, they ask you, just take the first noun or the last word maybe in the sentence, but then there's your answer. That gives you something to go by. It doesn't have to be something that people know. You're only going to know your methodology too, the way you do things. So, just a tip.
So in talking to some business owners and what their current accesses are, it's very common to hear that they're sharing the same user ID and password, which makes me cringe every time, just from a liability purpose. So if there is fraudulent activity and we go to research it and we see, well, Paul's been signing in this whole time, so we're going to look to Paul, but Paul's really shared his user ID with myself and Darcy, there's no way to really pinpoint who did that activity. Really, the liability is on Paul. He shared his user ID name and password. So it's super important to keep those segregated and have those single sign-ons for each of your users. From there, you're able to, you can break down what their entitlements are. So whether it's user entitlements, transaction entitlements, different activities that you want them to be, it really just needs to be specific to their job functions. So if Paul's an admin and he's sharing his user ID with multiple people, we can go in and we're having all the same entitlements as him. So we can go in and create new users, delete users, send a wire, send an ACH, but it's all gonna look like Paul's doing it. So again, falls back on the liability, and for tracking purposes, there's no way to really dispute that. So it's always important to segregate those out, give those users just what they need to be able to do their daily functions. And then in this case, so transaction amounts, you can set those daily or monthly if we're talking like electronic payment processing. So just to be able to split those out, it's always good to look into that. And also, depending on the business side, segregated duties, sometimes that's feasible and you can handle doing that because you have the individuals available to do so. But if you're able to do segregated payment functions, so if I go in and add the wire or edit the wire, I can't actually transmit it. So, which is keeping that segregated, Paul would be able to go in and actually transmit that. So it's taking two people to touch that, which can also cut back on, what could fraudulently be going on in there. Am I just going in and creating wires to myself and nobody's ever gonna see it because it's not segregated duties? So that's always, a best practice to put in place if you can. And then kind of flipping back to what Paul's already talked about with the emails, if it's not what you're expecting, obviously don't click on it. So in the world of like ACH, so if you go into the online banking and you create an ACH payment or even a wire payment, you're typically going to get a notification letting you know, a wire's been transmitted or an ACH has been approved. So you should expect those if you know what your daily activity is for transactions. So those would be like a norm. But let's say it's a Monday and you're not doing any payment processing, but you get a notification from the Fed for an ACH payment. Are you necessarily expecting that? No, probably not. So you probably shouldn't click on that. But again, it's just reaching out to those resources and saying, was I supposed to get this? Is there a payment that's processing? So just kind of being aware of the normal activity and knowing what's coming from the bank or from those payment processors. So, and then again, if you're in doubt, call to just ensure that you were supposed to receive that. Now, if you do click on that email and, because you're just going through your business day and you didn't stop to think about it, and you click on it, you click a link, and then the day goes on and you're realizing like your computer's bogging down, things aren't working like they should be or that they usually are, it's a good indication that you may have malware on your computer. So just kind of, the activity to pick up on in case you didn't pick up on the fraudulent email. Your computer should typically give you an indication that something's going on. And then as far as the personal information, so it kind of goes back to if I call out to you and I'm asking, well, can I verify you first before I start talking to you about your account? Can you give me your social security number, the last four, whatnot, and you don't feel comfortable with that? And I've had that happen in the past where they weren't really expecting the call from me, so they hung up and they called the bank back just to verify that it was legitimate, that I really did work for the bank, and I was really calling for a reason. But it's based on your comfort level, so if you're not comfortable, it's okay to say, no, I don't want to provide this to you, and end the call. And you can always call back just to verify before continuing. Now, as far as looking at features for when you're going through these processes, so if you're going out to a website and you're not sure if it's secure or not, Some key indications is obviously the HTTPS, that S being the main indicator. And then if you look at the URL, it'll either be on the left or the right-hand side, but it'll show the padlock kind of indicating a secure access point. And then login ID and passphrases, like we keep saying, complex, 15 characters. If you can interchange those special characters, lower and uppercase, the numbers, the more you're able to do that, the stronger the password. So, it gives a little bit more, difficulty for the fraudsters to get in there and really be able to hack that. Unless in the case that you have the keystroke going on in the background where they're actually tracking what you're entering each time. Computer registration. So that, for example, so I have a credit card personally that I know I have to go out onto the website. And when I go and sign in, they ask me, is this your personal computer? Would you like to register this as your personal device? Or is this a public computer? So obviously, depending on where you're accessing from, you would either say, yes, register this, this is my personal computer. And that just keeps it housed there so that they know this is a normal access point for you to go into and sign into the account. So if you say, no, this is a public computer, moving forward, the next time you sign in, it's going to keep prompting you the same question. So it's just an additional layer until you do register your personal computer. But anything outside of that, if you go to access it and it's not on that device, it'll still prompt you the same question. And then also with computer registration, there's flash cookies, which you may or may not be familiar with because it kind of happens behind the scenes. But when you go out to a site, there's these cookies that download, which is just an electronic file that goes in the background. And it's the indication that you're visiting this website. It'll hold those cookies in the background on your PC. And the next time you go to access it, it's already there. So it's granting you that access. Another option is the anti-phishing phrase or picture. So some online banking websites, when you go to set it up, you enter, you create your user ID and your password. Well, it also will have you select an image. And that is like your personal image tied to your ID. So down the road, you go to sign out and say, or maybe it's not even you, but somebody else is trying to sign in, and that image is incorrect. So that image is really just specific to your user ID and your indication that you're entering in the correct information. If not, it's going to lock you out. So outside of that is security alerts. So how do you really know what's going on without really being in the portals that you're using 24/7? So alerts are always a great thing. Some websites have mandatory required alerts where you don't have a choice. You can't shut them off. You're going to receive them regardless. So a lot of websites that you go out to now, you're probably getting email notification letting you know whether you've changed a payment amount, if something's been deleted, if there's been personal information updated. A lot of those alerts are mandatory, so you're getting those in your email. Those are normal, and they say, if you didn't do this, contact us, but if you did, just disregard it. So outside of the mandatories are optional. And in another slide, it kind of breaks it down a little bit more too. But with those optional alerts, depending on the portals that you're accessing and what activity you're doing, you can receive alerts for activity based on transactions. So say you're receiving a high dollar ACH, whether it's incoming or outgoing, you can receive notification of that. You can get that whether it's, and depending on the portal, but you can get it via text message or an email. Outside of the regular alerts, like so new users, you have users that are locked out or invalid password attempts, or they're logging in outside of their normal activity. You can set up notifications for that too, just as an indication. And as far as like the segregated duties, again, we're kind of going into limiting the numbers and the amounts of transactions, whether it's per day or per month. You can mitigate that based on each user. You can also, so dual authorization, that kind of falls back to that security as well, where we talk about computer registration and the picture. So a lot of the dual authorization, you probably are seeing a lot more now, where you either can get a text message and they give you a code and then you enter it into the website. So that's pretty common nowadays. It's pretty well across the board. And then they also have, so typically they'll have you set up 2 email addresses just in case you're not able to access one. They can send you the verification through another email. Phone calls and text messages are pretty normal. And then as an additional layer of security are tokens. So a lot of the financial institutions offer tokens as an additional layer of security, whether it be at the login point or at the transactional point. So either when you're logging in and you're entering your user ID and password, you have two options. There's either a soft token, which is like a virtual token. It's an app on your phone, and when you go to sign in, you'll pull up the app. It generates a 6-digit code, and you plug that 6-digit code in. So it's pretty similar to the dual authorization. The only difference is this is on a device instead of just an automatic phone call or text message or email. So you have either the virtual token or you have a physical key fob token that just has a power button on it. It generates the 6-digit code. They're both one and the same. It depends on you. Do you want the physical device to carry around with you, or do you want it on your phone? So again, just an additional layer. It doesn't replace passwords or anything of the such. It's just another obstacle for the fraudsters to have to get through. And obviously if they don't have that physical fob or the virtual access to your phone, they're not getting past that point. So another ways to prevent as far as the transactional activity that's going on. So for cash management, we have products like Positive Pay. So Positive Pay for checks or for ACH is what that does is, depending on your business activity, if you're issuing checks, you would log these checks in an issue file, which a lot of softwares now can generate this for you. So if you're in QuickBooks or whatnot, this will generate the report for you. So any of the checks you've issued, you would take that file and upload it into the online banking. And then from there, as items present themselves for clearing, as long as it's on that issue file that you uploaded, they're going to clear as normal, because you're saying those are okay, I issued those, those can pay. So those will go through as normal. Now let's say a check comes through that either you didn't include in the issue file or it's really a fraudulent check. It's obviously going to hit that file. It's not going to be included on that file, so it's going to kick out as an exception. So what that means for you is that you would sign into your online banking and see that exception, and you would be able to determine, oops, I forgot to put it in my upload file. I do want to pay that. So you can pay the item and it'll process as normal. Or if it is fraudulent, you can go ahead and mark it as return and it'll kick it out, which is really important as far as the ACH, because it works the same way. So checks, you'll upload the issue file, they'll clear as normal. If there's an exception, you have the option to work it. With ACH, those come through and they start building up a normal activity. So as ACHs are presented, you say, yes, this is normal, allow this ACH to always pay through. So if it's a normal vendor, like your insurance payments coming through, you obviously want those to pay. You don't want to have to individually work those every time they come through. So you can write the rule to have it pay automatically, but say there's an ACH that comes through and you don't want to pay it or it wasn't authorized. That really ties back to Reg E in the fact that businesses have 24 hours to dispute those charges. So ACH Positive Pay is a really good, prevention tool in the ACH fraud world, because you're getting those notifications daily. So that's keeping you within that 24-hour time frame to be able to monitor those. So if it comes through and it's fraudulent, obviously you want to flag that as return the item, because we're not going to pay it. But then it's, okay, so where did this come through? Why did this come through? It's unauthorized. It gives you, that time now to dispute it. So outside of that is risk and fraud analytics. So those are typically softwares that are running on that you can elect to purchase through a vendor, but it monitors the normal activity for your businesses and your users. And then in the case that there's a red flag that's triggered for anything, whether it's activity or not, that will alert you. So that gives you kind of a heads up as to what's going on, especially from like a system background. If there's something that's come through, and like I said, if you click that email and now your computer's really boggy and slow, those softwares will be able to pick up on that activity and kind of give you that red flag maybe before you notice that your computer's bogging down. And then risk mitigation. So as far as reducing, the risk out there, with whether it be cyber attacks or payment fraud, obviously, we would love if you could be able to check your accounts daily. That's not always the case. You're not always in the office. You're on the road. You're building your business, which kind of falls back on those alerts. So if you're not able to sign in every morning and review your account activity, you can depend on those alerts to a degree to provide you that information. If there's red flags, transactions that are coming through that you weren't expecting, your balances are falling below what you anticipated, the alerts are really there to just kind of support that and give you that extra. And then outside of that, determining your company risk and aversion. So there are consultations that you can go through. There's individuals that can help you kind of determine that if you feel like you need assistance in that, in that manner. But again, we repeat the fact that Reg E, I can't get that through enough because of that short time period. So with businesses, obviously, that's huge, where they don't have the same time frame as consumers. Consumers, I want to say, have 60 days from their statement So depending on when you actually, not when we mailed it, but when you actually received that statement as a consumer, you have 60 days to go back and dispute any of those transactions. So from a business perspective, that's tough because you're only getting 24 hours. And then the biggest thing, so Paul said, we're our weakest link typically, so internal education is huge. So whether it's your business policies and their employees, everybody kind of needs to be aware as to what their role is in preventing that risk. Whether it's fraudulent activity or cyber attacks, corporate account takeover. So the internal education is huge. Your employee, if you can keep your employees up to date and educated on what your policies are, that's pretty well step one. And then you can get into all of the system supports and the back-end supports and the payment preventions. So again, with the positive pay, I explained the ACH and the check positive pay, but ACH blockers, that is so I don't hear it very often, but there are companies that do not want to process ACH payments at all, or they just want to prevent ACH debits and allow all the credits to come through, but I do not want any ACH activity coming out of this account. So as an additional cash management tool is ACH blockers. So that, depending on your business and the activity, or maybe there's a specific account that you don't want to have any ACH activity on, regardless, you can set up the ACH blockers with your institution typically, and that will prevent that from happening. And then segregated duties, we touched on that, whether it be transactional segregated duties. I know a lot of businesses have like in-house segregated duties, whether it's moving paper and I sign here and then it goes to a second person, they review and sign off. It's kind of the same world for online portals as well. You can keep all of that segregated. That way there's at least two hands touching it before anything's released. And then prohibiting the use of social media on business resources. I think we've pretty well talked about that. But again, it's an extra doorway to let that, the malware and the ads that are out there, some of them might really catch your attention. Well, once you click on them, there's stuff going on in the background that you may not necessarily realize. So if you can just avoid social media on business resources, then that's great. And then locking down computers with administrative access. So not even so much as talking about portals and whatever you're accessing, but the computers themselves. So where that falls back to the business owners being responsible for their computers and internet access, that's the same thing with their administrative accesses for their user. So really they should only have access to the functions that they need to complete their daily tasks. So let's say, regardless of all of this, even if you've implemented it and you still have a disaster that occurs, whether it's a cyber attack or not, do you necessarily have a plan in place today that if something happened tomorrow that you would be able to take action, or at least have an indication of some action steps to take? So if you don't, it might not hurt to look into it. I know there's companies out there that will help you build out a plan for disaster recoveries, regardless if it's a natural disaster or a cyber disaster. And also with that is the idea of looking into additional insurances. So a lot of insurance plans now, because cyber attacks are becoming more of a norm, they've pulled that out of the regular insurance policies to make it its own. So your current insurance policies may or may not include cyber attacks, but there is that additional coverage that you can go out there and get cyber insurance for, and that could prevent you from paying out any losses, or at least mitigate how much you're paying out for losses. So it's just an option to look into.
There's so much more that we could say about all these things, but hopefully it just gives you a flavor for what you need to be aware of, steps that you can take to protect your businesses. The key thing is just to make sure that you keep your software patched. You want to be the least vulnerable target out there, because if a hacker comes along and sees you've got pretty good defenses, you got up-to-date software, various protections, VPN, whatever, they'll go on to some easier target. So I can't encourage you enough to consider that. I'm not going to read any of this. This I almost printed out as a handout, and I probably should have made it a checklist, but I encourage you to, this is on our Leading Women site, and I would encourage you to, go back to your offices at your convenience and print this out and go through it and consider all these things. They can be a lifesaver for you. And we put some resources here. This will give you some ideas about building a disaster plan. It talks about a lot of different things. Again, I don't have time to go through them, but they're there, and I encourage you to look at them at your convenience.